because in healthcare especially, my job is to take care of patients. My job isn't IT, and how I do that, it just looks a little different than what a nurse does or a physician does. But ultimately, that's where it all gets down to.
Technology is transforming how we think, how we lead, and how we win. From Intervision, this is Status Go, the show helping IT leaders move beyond the status quo, master their craft, and propel their IT vision.
Welcome to our recurring series, A Day in the Life. In this series, we sit down with a CIO who has spent the majority of their career in a specific vertical. Together, we explore some of the challenges, opportunities, and trends. We ask their why. Why do they do what they do? What are the rewards? In this episode, we're going to talk to Michael Mover. Michael is on his second stint as CIO of Riverview Health, a healthcare system with hospitals and urgent care facilities throughout Hamilton County, Indiana. He has seen a lot of change during his 18 years in healthcare IT, and I can't wait to talk to him about it. So, welcome to Status Go, Michael.
Thank you, Jeff.
Well, I want to dive right in, but I'd love to have you spend a little bit of time talking about your journey. I know you started in the consulting world with some of the larger firms, and then talk to us about that, and then how you ended up going into healthcare IT and staying there for your career.
Sure. My journey started a little unusual. Some friends and I decided to move down to Florida, and back in about 86, 87. And after that, I was hanging out and decided to join the military. So I went into the Army. I joined up, served 4 years in the military, and I got out. And my older brother, Harvey, was wanting me to go work in computers, and he was selling computers everywhere, and he
Yep.
was
I bought some computers from Harvey.
and so I was doing some other jobs, and so I took him up on that, and I was not good at selling computers. uh, but I was pretty good at working with them, and this is '92, the early days of
Mhm.
technology and networking and personal computers, and so I got into Novell and started working on that. I worked on some Windows NT projects, and then in about '94, I ended up working for Deloitte,
Mhm.
and I started out in kind of administration, kind of helping with maintain their systems. About 6 months into it, I went to one of the partners and said, I'm kind of bored. We fixed everything, right? You guys
Yeah.
hired me and you had all these problems. We fixed them all. What's next? And so they brought me into the consulting group. I hired my replacement shortly thereafter. So I just got that passion for consulting. Started to have kids, wanted to be home more, not travel as much. So worked for some regional firms here in town. A lot of people might know Whitman Hart, which became
Mhm.
March 1st, and then after that, Avicity, which then got acquired by Steve Hilbert with Haverstick Consulting, and then in '04 I took a CTO position here at Riverview. And through most of this, interestingly enough, I didn't have an undergraduate degree.
Mhm.
So in the late '90s, I went and finally completed my undergrad and my bachelor's degree. Then when I joined Riverview, I signed up for an MBA program and completed my MBA. But I was very late in life to getting that
Mhm.
advanced education. I spent 8 years here at Riverview, took a job down in Nashville, Tennessee to be the chief technology officer for St. Thomas Health. Spent about 7 years there. then went to a company called Horizon Health, which does healthcare in prisons and jails all across the country.
Hmm.
I spent 3 years there, and then this position came open again, and I got a text message from the chief nursing officer asking if I might have interest. And I was like, timing is everything, and
Yes,
it was
yes.
just great timing, and now I'm really excited to be back.
Well, it says a lot about the previous tenure that you had, that they were interested in having you back. So I got to ask, when you left the consulting space, did you have experience in the healthcare vertical when you went to Riverview the first time?
I had done a number of projects in healthcare. I wouldn't say I wouldn't even guess that I was an expert, but I had done, work for St. Vincent's, some revenue cycle optimization work. I'd done some work down at Wishart at the time for implementing a patient or a portal. That was a big thing back in the 90s,
Hmm.
your
Yep, yep.
internal portals, and some different types of work inside of the healthcare industry, but I was not by any stretch a healthcare expert. Riverview was at a point where it really needed a technology expert
Okay.
more than a healthcare expert,
Yeah.
and so that made it, timing and opportunity, right, was that is everything.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and now you've spent 18 years in the vertical. So now I'd say you're an expert in healthcare IT. After 18 years in there, would you kind of agree?
I wish I knew as much today as I thought I did 18 years ago, because I thought I was brilliant back then, and today I just am amazed at how little I sometimes know. But
Well, maybe that's a great step, just knowing what you don't know. That's awesome. Yeah, yeah. So let's talk a day in the life. I always feel like a game show host. Michael Mover, this is your life. But let's talk about a day in the life of being a CIO for a healthcare system like a Riverview. What's it like?
so, it's varied, as you can imagine. The challenges and the things that you do go from very global strategic type discussions. This morning we had our executive team meeting that we have on a weekly basis, and we're really discussing, what are the one or two major initiatives we need to all get behind, and problems we solve that are not technology problems, they're operational problems,
Hmm.
but they're going to have a technology piece to them, and technology needs to be there to support it. To getting into the very detailed weeds around, one particular technology stack that we have to replace by, the end of August. We've got something that we have to make a decision to stay or to
Hmm.
leave, and it's just come up, and we got to make a decision on, individual technology solutions of, is that something, what do we want to do with it.
Yeah.
You also get very involved in solving, in escalating problems, and you're kind of an escalation point in
Yeah.
many cases. And normally the teams take great care of everybody, but in I always try to help people understand, in a healthcare organization, in a traditional manufacturing world, which I spent a lot of time in when I was in consulting, you've got a set of VPs, right? And those VPs, are the chiefs,
Yep.
and there's a limited number of them. And in healthcare, you have your same set of VPs, but you also have a whole set of physicians and
Right.
physician leadership,
Yeah.
and they are driving the organization
Hmm.
just like any VP would in any other company, but they may not even be employed by you. So it creates a interesting dynamic because we need them to drive the organization, right? Everything
Yeah.
you do inside of healthcare, you always try to keep a quality lens on everything that you're doing. So, how is when you're making decisions, unlike if I'm making widgets and how can I make 10 more widgets an hour, I'm really focused on, yes, I want to be able to make 10 more widgets an hour, but I need to be able to make those 10 widgets an hour with with five nines or better of
Hmm.
quality,
Yep.
um, because I cannot, every time we miss, there's a person at the end of that miss. And
Yeah.
so we take that very, very seriously all the time.
Well, so it sounds like you have gotten to the point where you are involved in a lot of, we'll call them business discussions, that may not have anything to do with technology per se, but always technology is kind of in that background. So what are some of the challenges that you've seen that maybe you've overcome in your career? But what are some of the challenges facing healthcare IT professionals?
Obviously, data security is such a critical issue that we've all been facing. And I think one of the things a lot of us probably didn't do as well as we could have is look at all of that Internet of Things type of stack and make sure that those were as secured as we could.
Hmm.
Several years ago, we had WannaCry rampant
Oh
within
yeah.
healthcare, and I mean many hospitals literally shut their doors to patients due to that. And it's complicated because we have a stress test machine attached to a treadmill, and there's a Windows 7 computer attached to it.
Yeah.
And nobody was thinking about that Windows 7 computer back in those days. And so now, we're thinking very, very hard about those. Or you have a laser, I mean, I remember we had a Windows 95 laser that we just literally could not recover the laser. We had to go, spend $100,000 to buy a new laser, and because it was just unrecoverable. It was a 15-year-old laser, but it worked just fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, we get so involved in these in everything. I was just, in fact, having a conversation with some friends over at Blue Sky, and was explaining to them how we're involved in almost every purchasing decision. If it
Hmm.
plugs in, we're involved in it, and sometimes even if it's not. Now, my favorite example now is there are bedpans out there that actually notify you when they've been used. And so, the idea that I would actually have a say in which bedpan now
Bedpans.
we
Yes.
purchase never occurred to me. Okay.
I bet. I
um,
bet that's not something you think about.
it is not, and yet you've got to start looking everywhere
Hmm.
for these, because the you're only as strong as your weakest link.
Hmm.
And as we know in this industry, I mean, there are bad actors all over the place. We've seen it at several hospitals in the greater Indianapolis area, that have had ransomware attacks,
Yeah.
and these things are really, really serious, and we take it very, very seriously, trying to protect our patients' information, as well as protect our ability to actually be able to serve Hamilton County, which is what we're here to do.
Well, and that's got to be a huge part of your day. You mentioned cybersecurity and protecting patient data. That has to be at the top of mind all day, every day in healthcare.
It
So
is, yeah.
when you think about that aspect of it, what things have you done without giving away any secret sauce or anything like that? But what things have you done that have kind of moved the needle in your mind in protecting patient data?
There's a handful of things out there. One, there are public-private partnerships, things like InfraGard, which are extremely valuable. I would recommend to any kind of CIO that's out there that's got any kind of large scale infrastructure. Get involved with InfraGard. They will add value, and they will help you think differently about some of these things. There are and then the other thing is educating your customers, educating the staff, helping them understand that it's not, this isn't an IT problem. This is all of our responsibility. We cannot make up for bad behavior. And so starting to kind of change the discussion from when I send out the phishing attacks here locally, which we
Hmm.
do on a regular basis, we self test all the time, and people pop on us, trying to take that from it's IT beating up on you to, hey, it's your department manager having
Yeah.
the conversation. And we're not asking you to do this because we just want to pick on you. We're asking you to do this because we need your help in protecting, the information and the environment.
Yeah.
I mean,
It, it's great if you can form that partnership, if you will, with the other people in the facility, in the healthcare system, that that you're really in this together. As I heard somebody say the other day, I was talking with a CEO of a technology company that caters to the healthcare industry, and he described it as being the custodian of the patient's data. And if you can form that partnership, that goes a long way. And to me, that sounds so much better than IT being the Department of No.
right.
Yeah. So the other thing, the other challenge, and I think we touched on this a couple weeks ago, Michael, when we talked, is the concept of shadow IT. Is that a challenge in the healthcare industry?
I think it's always a challenge. I think in probably any industry. In healthcare, it gets a little bit unique in that you have certain areas, maybe radiology, where you have PACS systems, picture archiving and capture systems that, are taking your radiology images, your CTs, your MRIs, all that good stuff. And it is a very unique skill set. And there's a crossover point between the operational piece of imaging as to the IT piece. And where that crossover point is I pull that image in, and then I have to have somebody review that image to make sure that it was taken properly, that it's
Hmm.
set properly, that it's the right patient, and I have the right accession numbers, and all these little pieces to it. And that's kind of a crossover point that you often get, and you try to figure out where does that skill belong.
Hmm.
And what I've always said to people is, the only reason we bring somebody into IT rather than let them stay in the department is if they're not following good standard procedures, right? They're not following my change control processes.
Hmm.
They're not following the notifications and doing backups, and they're not fully engaging us, because they don't get to nobody in this world gets to make decisions all on their own. I think that's the thing a lot of people don't understand. It doesn't matter if you're the CEO or the CIO, or even, the president of the board. Nobody gets to make these decisions all by themselves anymore.
Yeah.
And
Everything is so interconnected.
yeah, no good, I guess I should say, no good leaders make those decisions all by themselves,
Yeah.
right? And so
Yeah. Yeah.
it's what you've got to do is you got to make sure that that's understood. And if you have that type of relationship, it can go really, really well, because what you end up getting is somebody who's in imaging, sits in the imaging department, completely understands those radiologists' workflow and those radiology technologists' workflows and the scheduling and every aspect of it. And they're your conduit to IT. And
Yeah.
so, in some ways, it can become more of a super user than a shadow IT,
Hmm.
at its best place. But they're not buying servers, they're not implementing servers, they're not buying new software without getting everybody else that needs to be involved. And that certainly happens sometimes. But it's if you keep your door open, I think,
Hmm.
and you say, this is how we want to bring you in, and this is how we want to work with you, and we're not the Department of No. I think
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
is a great example. So often I hear that about CIOs. And I had one chief medical officer say that to me, that it's so refreshing working with you, Mike, because when my last CIO, everything was no. And you guys just never, you tell me how we can do it and what we can do. And I go, well, you tell me the problem you got, and we love solving problems, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's IT in a nutshell, is give us a problem to solve, and we're gonna solve it.
Well, and I think the other aspect that I've learned about you is you mentioned leaving the door open, and the visualization of that was the CIO sitting in their office, right? But you're not. You're out. You're out in the facilities, right? And I think you also encourage your team to do that. What's your reasoning behind that?
I think, presence is such a big deal, and in healthcare, it is such a personal relationship that our nurses and our physicians have with our patients, and they kind of expect to have that same personal relationship. I think not only with
Hmm.
IT but with finance and operations, and so I can't have that personal relationship, or it doesn't feel great if I'm sitting in my office all the time. If I'm
Yeah.
not, you've got to meet them where they are. Um, and look, there is nobody who loves remote working and setting things up for success. I mean, 10 years ago, I had most of my folks would work 2 to 3 days a week from home.
Yeah.
It's perfect. It's great. There's no good reason not to do it. And I was, I'll say it here because I'm no longer working for the company. I was literally violating our corporate policy by letting folks do that because I just thought it was insane that I was going to tell these people they had to be in the office 5 days a week. But I do need them in the office at least a couple of days a week because I need them to be out there walking the floors and
Hmm.
talking to people. And sometimes, look, we always fear the shoulder taps in IT because that's how people get
Yep.
around the help desk and all that stuff. But those shoulder taps show a sense of trust and community.
Yeah.
And when I need you, and when we're doing an upgrade, or when we have a major problem, all of a sudden we've built that capital and we've built that trust because you saw me there and I was responsive, and we were working with you to try to solve this problem that often wasn't of our making, but we're trying to solve it anyway.
So you are doing a hybrid work environment like many organizations are migrating to right now. Um, but I think you've been very clear that you're doing it. This is not about managing productivity. This
Now,
is you need that relationship, right?
exactly, it's all about the relationship. Look, if I am having problems managing productivity, that is a leadership problem, and I will go to my grave saying that productivity management is a leadership problem. And if I am having that, if I have people that we've hired that we have to worry about that, I probably hired the wrong person.
Yeah, yeah.
um, you know, IT is a professional industry. We expect to hire professionals, who are highly experienced, highly trained. They know their technologies. Yes, they're at all different levels of training and capability, but we're looking to hire professionals,
Hmm.
and professionals don't. I don't hire people so I can tell them what to do. I hire people so they can tell me what they should be doing.
Yeah, I love that. And the other thing that you said in that, Michael, is that as people are out building those relationships, the the doctors and the nurses have such a personal relationship with their patients. They expect to have that with, we'll call it their support team, right?
Yeah.
The back office team. And I've never heard it quite said that way before. I loved that concept about that personal relationship. And it raises a question for me. Is does Riverview use telehealth? Is that something that is now part of the Riverview system?
We do, and some of our patients absolutely love it, and some of our patients don't. Some of them
Hmm.
really want to have, they want to be in that physician's office and be face to face. And
Hmm.
as great as our telehealth technologies are, there's still a time and a place for having those face-to-face
Yeah.
meetings, and you end up chatting on things that you might not always do on a telehealth, a
Yeah.
televisit, where it's a little bit more down to business. From a dollars and cents perspective, sure, we love the get down to business,
Hmm.
but from a patient experience and a
Yeah.
personal satisfaction level, we want you to have a relationship with your physician,
Hmm.
because then when he tells you, you need to be taking your meds, or you do need to go get this test, or you need to get vaccinated, you're going to listen to it because you have built that personal relationship with them.
Yeah, foundation of trust, right?
It is
Yeah. Well,
absolutely.
and I would assume that the doctors and the nurses also feel similarly about the telehealth. Is that, yeah, they like the tool, but they also want that personal relationship. So maybe a hybrid of that.
I think we all do. I mean, I think we're very, we are social beings, and we need to have that personal connection with folks. And it really is critical. Um, and just like when your doctor gets to tell you, hey, don't eat so much, which I do hear occasionally. Um,
Me too. Me too.
yeah, when your IT guy tells you, hey, you really need to pay attention to those emails that you got and not click on that link from a person that you don't know, from an email you didn't expect, right? You
Mm-hmm.
need to pay a
Yeah.
little closer attention. You'll respect it a little bit more because you've got that personal relationship.
Yeah.
And I think if there's one thing I've learned in my years in the industry and in my years as a professional, it's there is no substitute for that personal relationship. You
Yeah.
have to have it.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to ask you to get out your crystal ball here in just a second. But before I do that, I want to ask you, what's your why? I know you get paid to do what you do, but why healthcare, and why 18 plus years? What are you getting out of it, Michael?
I often call myself a technology optimist. I really do believe that technology has the ability to fundamentally make the human experience better. That we can make you more talented, smarter, faster, more accurate, all of these things. And I would say I've probably spent the last 18 years chasing that goal
Hmm.
of how do I just make things better. I often have gone into organizations. I said it here at Riverview the first time I was here. I said it at St. Thomas. I want to make this organization the best place to be. And I don't care if you're a physician, a nurse, staff employee, or a patient, or a visitor. I want to make this the best it can be, to give you the best experience when you're here. And I do think, you know there's a role from a technology perspective in
Hmm.
every single one of those experiences.
I love that. The personal reward from making it the best place that it can be. All right, so I warned you, crystal ball time. What's on the horizon? What things are you looking at as a CIO of a healthcare system? The buzz, digital transformation, and all that. But what are you seeing out there in the future?
We're certainly focused around all of our analytics, right? Everybody, data is the new oil. We all get
Hmm.
that. We all know it. We just don't know what kind of car oil is going to power yet.
Hmm.
And some organizations are getting faster to figuring that out than others. I think what we're going to see is, that's going to end up being a big delimiter between, the successful organizations and those that are, stagnating, is how do you leverage that information that we have and that we've got at our fingertips. That's kind of the easy one. I think as we really start to look at, you know 5, 7, 10 years out, I mean, as you look at some of the things around, whether it's self-driving automobiles and how some of that works, how does that actually start to look when we get into, healthcare systems, right?
Hmm.
When I'm cleaning floors and cleaning rooms and doing terminal cleanings and those types of things, as I'm moving meds around, as I'm doing some of the generic work within an organization, how does some of that type of intelligence work in a much more localized
Hmm.
fashion, and where does some of that fit in? I don't think we've figured some of that out yet. um, I think some of the work around, the obviously the internet of things, and the,
Hmm.
the democratization of technology based on that, and the fact that, everything is providing you feedback and data. I just bought a new home, and I installed the Ecobee home thermostat, and
Hmm.
I've got several, little sensors all around my house telling me what temperature it is in different rooms, so that I can adjust, my thermostat for that. Well, that, yes, it's going to save me some money, and that's great, but why did I do it? Not for the $20 a year it's going to save me, but it's going to hopefully make my house, more evenly cooled or more
Right.
evenly
Right.
heated. I'm not going to have hot areas and cold areas. Well, my house is, a few thousand square feet. You've got 100,000 square feet under a roof in a hospital. So
Hmm.
being able to start to uh, do some of those types of things and use some of the automation technologies to really be able to move the needle, and make people's jobs easier, right? because
Yep.
because people are amazing, and if you give them an opportunity to go do things, and you get some of that, the little annoyances, right, the routine work out of their way, I have often found they will surprise the heck out of you on
Yeah.
how much they can do and accomplish. Um, and it's everybody in the organization. This isn't a technology issue again. It's not even just a nursing or a physician issue. This is finance and facilities and HR and housekeeping. This is everybody has, so much potential in them, that I think our opportunity is to unleash some of that potential
Potential.
by getting rid of some of the things that are just routine work.
Yeah. I love that. Unleash the potential. Well, Michael, as you know, here on Status Go, we are all about action. It's kind of in our name. So, what are one or two things that our listeners should do tomorrow because they listened to our conversation today?
I think, think about that for a second, as I think about what should you be doing right now, I would say, if you're not doing it, create those personal relationships. Go talk to somebody, go work with people, have lunch with them, have whatever it is, who are not in your department, right? Go go start to understand how your organization works, and really get deep into that. It's interesting. One of the folks that worked for me, used to always complain that I would, in a positive way. He said, I've never had a boss that, asks me the questions you do. And I'll never forget one of the first questions I asked him. He was over my imaging group, actually. I said, what's it cost us to do a radiology study? He goes, I have no idea. I go, well, you know what? That's probably a piece of information we should know.
Mhm.
And, a couple years later, we started to go figure that out. But really getting to understand, your business, and whether it's HR or finance or nursing or lab or radiology, or if you're in manufacturing, whether it's distribution or get out on the floor,
Mhm.
get out of your office and get out on the floor and talk to some of these people, because you know what? They are brilliant, and they all will provide you insights that you never ever imagined. And it is rare that I find somebody. If I find somebody I can't learn something from, usually I think the problem's probably me, not them. Um, just have your cup empty. Be willing to learn from these folks that are out there. And I think, you know, if you can do that, all of a sudden, you will one, you'll be I think you'll be happier,
Hmm.
right? It's a whole lot easier to work for a company that you understand, and you're not just a cog in the wheel. You're not
Yeah.
just, pushing a broom. You're part of the company. And then two, you'll be way more effective. You'll start
Hmm.
to understand why you're doing what you're doing. And I think that helps. I think especially the people who have been more seasoned in their career, we want people to understand the organization and understand the backdrop of what you're here for.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important because, in healthcare especially, you ask anybody here and their answer should be, my job is to take care of patients.
Yeah.
My job isn't IT. My job is to take care of patients. And how I do that, it just looks a little different than what a nurse does or a physician
Yeah.
does. My job is to support them so that they can take care of their patients. But ultimately, that's where it all, gets down to.
That is great advice. Get out and build those relationships. Be open. I love the image of having your cup empty and be ready to be filled with knowledge as you're out walking around and talking with people. Michael, I got to thank you for carving out time. I know you're in the midst of your relocation back to the Indy area, and I appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today. So thank you.
Well, thank you. It's certainly been my pleasure.
To our listeners, if you have a question or want to learn more, visit intervision.com. The show notes will provide links and contact information. This is Jeff Tunn for Michael Mover. Thank you very much for listening.
You've been listening to the Status Go podcast. You can subscribe on iTunes or get more information at intervision.com. If you'd like to contribute to the conversation, find Intervision on Facebook, LinkedIn, or Twitter. Thank you for listening. Until next time.